Yes, it's Uncle Jegs. Last time we looked at bacterial diseases, specifically Salmonella, gonorrhea, and a bonus of agrobacterium. Clickety-click the card to check that one. This lesson's all about fungal diseases, but guess what? I'll throw in protist diseases as well.
You know the one. You buy one, you get one free. I said you buy one, you get one free. Right now.
So, let's chop some science. Here are the retrieval questions. You know what to do. The vena cava carries blood to the right atrium. Statins reduce blood cholesterol. And pacemaker cells are located in the right atrium. The previous pathogens that we saw were viruses and bacteria. Now, viruses aren't even considered to be living organisms, so we don't even have them on the tree of life. That's because until they land on a complementary host cell, they're essentially just very complex molecules bouncing around the gaff. Bacteria, on the other hand, are cells and so are considered to be living organisms. They have internal structures that are capable of performing chemical reactions independent of the host cell. When we look at the tree of life, we find two main branches that comes out of our common ancestor. Bacteria, and another one leads to archaea and eukaryotes. Both bacteria and archaea are prokaryotes because their DNA isn't stored inside a nucleus, it's found freely in its cytoplasm. Within eukaryotes, you have these two pathogens that we're going to study today, fungus and protists. Since these two do not have a nucleus, that means that fungi and protista both have a nuclei.
Obviously.
Eukaryotes also include animals and plants as well. For GCSE, you can classify something as a protist if it is a eukaryotic organism that isn't an animal, plant, or a fungus. Okay?
Okay.
Let us look at how well you do here. Take some time to try and identify which of these is the protist. The amoeba is the protist, the yeast is the fungus, and the sperm cell is a type of animal cell. This is the pathogen that causes rose black spot. The pathogen is technically called diplocarpon, but for GCSE you can just call it rose black spot. It produces spores that travel by wind and rain. These spores then attach to the leaves and all hell breaks loose.
You are the enemy of the people. Go ahead, Mr.
As you can see, the symptoms are these purplish black spots on leaves. Also notice how some of the leaf is yellow. This leaf is likely going to drop off soon. Have a go at these challenge questions. For the first question, people tend to look at the color, the size, the smell, and the symmetry of a particular plant. So any of those will give you the mark for the first question. Farmers can either cut the leaves, the infected leaves, or burn the whole plant altogether, or they can even use fungicide. The suffix "side" means killer of, like suicide, where "su" is Latin for oneself, which means killer of oneself. Therefore, fungicide means killer of fungi.
Man, the man is killing us, man. Over.
Most of you may have gotten 1 mark for this question because you should be able to clock that the leaves are less attractive. But the second mark comes from the lack of photosynthesis, which then leads to lack of growth, so the growth of the plant is stunted. Can you see that one? The fungal disease is done.
Yeah, boy. That's it.
Let's slide over to the protist disease. Here I have 7 different organisms, and on the right I have the number of people killed per year. Pause the video and see if you can link up the organism with the number of people that it kills per year. If you can't do all of them, try and get at least the most and the least. Okay, here are the answers. Looking at this, I was so surprised when I found out that snails killed 1,000 times more people than sharks. That sounds nuts. Some estimates even have this as high as 400,000 people. But look here, the most consistent deadly organism to humans are mosquitoes. Mosquitoes themselves are relatively harmless. They're annoying, but the mosquitoes themselves don't kill us. It's the pathogen that hitches a ride on its saliva that's dangerous.
Ew.
Before we actually look at the pathogen itself, let's level up our definitions. There are 3 players in this game of malaria. The host, which is the organism that's harmed from the relationship. In this example, that would be the humans. The vector, which is the organism that transmits the pathogen from an infected individual to another individual. In this example, that's the mosquito. And finally, the parasite. This is the organism that causes the harm to the host as it develops. And in this example, that is our protist. In this GIF, you can see that the protist is infecting cells and causing them to burst. Disgusting. Can I geek out just a tiny bit? Can I geek out a little bit? Honestly, I actually can't help it. When I see evolution, I have to point it out. I just have to. This is what your red blood cells normally look like. We call it a biconcave shape because it caves in on 2 sides, just like bicycle, 2 wheels. Bi means 2. Some individuals have a mutation that causes the red blood cells to look like this. They have a sickle-shaped red blood cell, hence the name sickle cell disease. Remember that you have 2 copies of DNA, one from mom and one from dad. If you inherit 2 copies of the sickle cell mutation, then you have full-blown sickle cell disease. But if you only inherit 1 copy of sickle cell gene, you don't develop the full-blown disease because you have enough normal hemoglobin, which is what is being affected. What we find is that individuals that are carriers of 1 copy of the gene are better at fighting malaria. So the environment, the pathogen, is providing a selection pressure for the carriers of the sickle cell trait, and those that have it are more likely to survive and replicate, passing on that useful trait. Obviously, this means that unfortunately there will be some people born with the sickle cell disease by inheriting 2 copies of the disease, but I find this a very interesting case of natural selection. Just look at this diagram. You see that the regions that have high rates of the sickle cell allele are also areas that tend to have a lot of malaria.
Are you done now?
Yep, wasn't that amazing?
Oh my God! Wow! Oh my God!
Here's the full life cycle for the malaria illness. Take some time to take all of this in and identify the cells that are being affected. Now, you know what to do. Remember that the vector is what transfers the pathogen. So the mosquito is the vector in this example. And to be specific, it's the female Anopheles mosquito. You can see that liver cells are affected, but also red blood cells are affected. Don't just say that blood cells are affected because it's the red ones, not the white ones, that are affected. One of the biggest differences between the males and the females is that females tend to be capable of bearing offspring. So you should have clocked that they need the blood for their offspring or for eggs or something like that. The main symptoms for malaria involves episodic fever, which can then become fatal. Now let's look at how to prevent the spread of malaria. We can use mosquito nets, removing standing water, and also invest in insecticides. There's that side again. The nets prevent bites. The standing water is needed for mosquitoes to have their offspring, so removing it destroys the habitat, and also insecticides obviously kills the mosquito, and so the protist cannot infect us. And would you look at that? Lesson done.
Fatality.
A quick summary, we looked at the symptoms and the effect of rose black spot and how to treat it. This is caused by a fungus. Then we looked at the life cycle and treatment of malaria, which is caused by a protist. Check the descriptions to get the adapted specification if you need that, and I'll catch you guys in a bit.